Okay, welcome to Rabbit and Snail's Film Talk, and I'm absolutely delighted to say that we are joined by the Dame of the Hackney Empire, as is the wonderful Mr. Maurice Bright, MBE.
Thank you very much.
Hello, sir, and welcome to Film Talk.
Thank you very much.
It's great to have you back, and we've got a great film as we compile the 100 greatest films of all time, in our opinion, for what it's worth. And what's your contribution today?
Today, mine is perhaps a slightly uncelebrated classic film. It's an early drama from the 1960s, and it's called Victim.
Ah, wow. Yes.
And it stars Dirk Bogarde as a barrister who discovers that he's becoming embroiled in blackmail because actually he is homosexual. His wife doesn't realise. And a young man kills himself because he wants to protect the people he's having relations with. But there are photographs lying around, and Dirk Bogarde's character suddenly finds that he is, along with other people, involved in what's effectively a blackmail ring, because homosexuality was still against the law in those days. We're talking about the early 60s. Nothing happened until the law was changed in 1967, and it was a drama of its time, because this was actually going on. People in high places and high-ranking jobs were being blackmailed for their homosexuality, for their sexuality.
There's a lot of truth, a lot of vitality in the film and realism there.
Yes, there is. And Sylvia Syms plays his wife, who has a feeling, I think, when they get married, that he has leanings towards homosexuality, but believes she can make him happy. It's one of those stories, because that was the perception in those days. And I spoke with Sylvia Syms a couple of years ago, and I said, the character, how could the character not know? And she said it wasn't talked about, and it was the early 60s, and it was kept under wraps. And in the case of her character, she was a vicar's daughter. She wouldn't have known much about it anyway, and so she was perfectly willing to believe that he was innocent, if you like, of the charges that were being... He wasn't doing anything wrong, but he was innocent of what he was being accused of doing. And it was very difficult, because there's a scene in the film where they effectively have a confrontation in the living room, where she said, well, what's going on? Tell me about him. And he blurts out, and he almost spits out with anger, I wanted him. Okay, I wanted him. And there's that great... It's painful, because you can see her heart breaking as she understands the level of his feelings for someone else who is a man. And also you can see his frustration and having to say it because you know it's going to hurt her, but to vocally admit it as well. So it's very strong, very strong.
And a lot of realism in Dirk's performance too, because it kind of does mirror his own domestic arrangement.
A huge risk for Dirk Bogarde. So let's recap. With the early 1960s, homosexuality is still against the law. Dirk Bogarde has been the heartthrob and the highest paid actor in the UK for most of the 1950s. Lots of light, fluffy films, a few heavy dramas as well, the Doctor series and so on. And he comes to make this film. What the industry knows privately, but what the populace don't, is that he's homosexual himself. And in fact, he lived with his agent for 40 years. They were very happy together. But of course, this wasn't something the industry could talk about. So it was a huge gamble, if you like, but it was something he felt quite strongly about. And his performance won him a BAFTA nomination for Best Actor. But it was a bit of a gamble, and it's sandwiched between other films like Doctor in one of the Doctors, and he went back and did another Doctor in the 60s. But it was a big gamble for him and for his career, but it's something he really wanted to do. And nowadays we think of, we see films about different sexuality and dramas, we don't think much about it. But if you sit and watch this film now and remember that it's been made in 1961, and they come back from a trip in their car and they come out and someone's written on his garage, I think Farr is queer, and the shock on the faces, the wife didn't even understand what the word queer meant. And so this is really powerful. And it also has deeper sadness within it, because one of the actors that was playing a part of a person being blackmailed was Dennis Price. And you remember Dennis Price from the Ealing comedies,
yes,
a fun actor who had a very good early career. He was himself homosexual, and again wasn't talking about it, and was in real life being blackmailed. And in fact, towards the end of his career, you'll note, as it came late 60s, early 70s, he became quite bloated. He basically became an alcoholic. and he died in his 50s, and it turned out he was being blackmailed for his sexuality. So there are parts of it that said this is more than just a drama, this is more than just a representation on film. This is, if you like, almost a docudrama of what was going on at the time, and very bold, very well written from all sides, showing everyone's side of this, and really giving you an idea of what it was like for people, perhaps with a different sexuality to what was established then as the norm, and what it was like for them. And I think it's a very strong film indeed. And it's something which I think is worth watching. Generations now who weren't living in those days should watch it now to understand exactly what it was like for people being bullied, harassed and blackmailed for just wanting to live their own lives.
A great social commentary of the time, and a lasting document of that, as you say.
Yes, it was. It is a lasting document of its time. And as I say, I think sometimes when you watch a film, you need to not just watch it for what's on the screen, but you need to say, where is it placed in history? When was it made? So what was going on at the time? So that you actually get a deeper understanding of it. And you watch it now, it's still very powerful to me. I've met Dirk Bogarde and I've met Sylvia Syms, and I spoke with them about the film, and I know how protective she was of it, because they knew that they were doing something which was not just socially important, but would have an effect. And it did. It had a very positive effect. People couldn't actually believe it. Because people don't have conversations about issues, especially in those days, you didn't have 24-hour news and you didn't have all the technology you have now where everything's in front of you. They got the information they got from newspapers, and they got the information from the news, and that was it. And they're starting to go to the cinema, and they're starting to have social issues, like Room at the Top you had some of the
kitchen sink dramas,
exactly.
All of that era. Albert Finney.
Correct. Albert Finney and the Tom Courtneys and the Julie Christies and all those wonderful films, and the Richard Attenboroughs and the Union films and the Alan Bates, the Northern gritty dramas as well. You had all that going on, and suddenly, well, this is London. London's supposed to be great, a happy place. All these wealthy people are supposed to be happy, but they've got a secret which they have no choice but to keep. And this is a side of life perhaps you haven't heard about, but actually needs to be told because it's unfair. And these type of films then lead to the changes in legislation that are needed, because you have a popular uprising, if you like. And in those days it was film, and to a certain extent television, that was able to do that. Now it's on a tweet, it's on a petition online. Those days people needed to really see something en masse. Enough of that, we can't have that anymore. So it was a gamble for Bogarde. He was greatly admired for doing it. It could have been the end of his heartthrob career, but it wasn't. And it was a socially important film of its time, but still very, very worth watching for some wonderful acting performances from some British greats, and an incredibly good script, which I think was also nominated for an award also.
Fantastic. And maybe as a final comment on Dirk as well, it's another example of how he has often taken risks and chances with his career, because he started off playing the kind of the criminal, the petty criminal kind of character, like in The Blue Lamp, and then he takes a real chance and gets into the comedies, the Doctor series, which was a real change for him, huge success, and then he changes again, and he wants to try and experiment, do different things. He's a real performer, isn't he, in many respects?
Dirk Bogarde didn't want to get earmarked or pigeonholed for doing particular types of roles. So early in his career, like any actor, he would take what was coming and, play a nasty. I mean, you think of Richard Attenborough, you think of that in Brighton Rock. They played those types of characters early on. And then it became quite apparent that this guy is a good-looking chap and could be the next one on the rank school of charm. And so people like Betty Box, the film producer who did the Doctor films, spots this guy along with Kenneth More and others and says, yeah, OK, we've got a bit of a group here. And they were a good-looking bunch. And Dirk looked very good with Muriel Pavlov, who was the female lead and the love interest in some of the Doctor films. And he looked great. And it soon became very apparent that whatever he did, he was going to look lovely. And so he as I said, in the 50s, he was a heartthrob, highest paid actor of the 1950s, queues wherever he was showing up for a premiere, people throwing him stuff, etc. and so on. So he was very, very big. But he was an actor, and he felt strongly about the craft, and he was very frustrated by the end of the 50s that all he was getting offered was pretty boy parts, and he didn't want pretty boy parts forever. And the very fact that he then took the risks that he did with his career, then he left Pinewood, he left rank in 1963, didn't return till 1996.
And you were there for that.
I was very honoured to get him back for the first time in 33 years. He almost shunned everything he'd done as not unworthy, but part of his life he didn't. But that was it. I don't want to go back there. He'd written lots of books, and he'd taken risks with some of the films he'd done in Europe and so on. So it was delightful to get him back. And actually, he'd come full circle, reuniting him with Muriel Pavlov, reuniting with Betty Box and Rafe Thomas. And actually, as he got to the later time and the end of his life, and he had a stroke a few months afterwards, it was quite lovely to see them back together again, and him kind of got rid of that, I don't want to talk about that, and actually hug and spend time with the people that made him famous. So he went full circle. But no, he was a great actor. I think he could have done more. He probably could have done more in his country. He spent a lot of time in Europe, but someone who I was very honoured to meet, and someone who I think played his part in making us think very, very strongly and directing us towards some of the big social issues of the time. And that's why Victim is a great film, and I'd recommend anyone to watch it.
And on so many levels, a worthwhile addition, an important addition to our top 100.
Yes, absolutely. So,
the greatest films
absolutely,
ever made.
not just worth watching, not just socially important, not just entertaining. Films like that can be entertaining. Watching the greatness of the acting. So all round, and the script is wonderful, the acting is wonderful, and you really feel for the characters. So for me, it's a film that should be in there.
Fantastic. Victim, Dirk Bogarde, Sylvia Syms, a great addition to our top 100 of the greatest films ever made, in our opinion. And what better film to add? Maurice, thank you very much.
Thank you.